Okay, well, thanks everyone for having me. My talk's called Rust-Friendly Web Apps and Websites. My name's Angus. Maybe a better talk title would have been something like, I've been a front-end engineer, so you don't have to, or something like this, because I feel the pain a lot of people talk about with front-end engineering. It can be really hard to get into lots and lots of layers and layers of abstraction and like ecosystems that are just constantly changing. So like when I say Rust friendly here, I'm talking about like, my experience of Rust, which is like kind of things that are really understandable, things that you can kind of being empowered to like, use libraries that that you understand, and maybe you could even imagine writing from scratch or something like this. So and giving you like a deeper understanding of like what really is a website, how is it powered, like how does it run, like that kind of thing. Okay. The tool's kind of split into two parts. Like the first part is about like the Rust web scene at the moment. And then the second part is about like building your own blog. So that's a little bit of fun practical at the end. Cool. So let me get my little laser pointer up. Like Rust is really in a really good place at the moment, like when it comes to the web. So loads and loads of stuff. So Cloudflare workers, you can run Rust on them. Especially like, so we're not talking really about like necessarily running Rust code in your web browser or as part of your website directly, but like, powering, building or analyzing, or, like there are examples obviously where like here, like Rust in production at Figma. I don't know if you know Figma, it's a really popular tool for designers, and had a massive sale recently to Adobe. But like other things here, like Turbo Repo and TurboPack, these are by a company called Vercel, which is like a really big name in the web space right now. That help you bundle and manage your web dependencies. The SWC, which I love the name, Speedy Web Compiler, is a really cool project. Dino, also runtime for Rust written in runtime for JavaScript written in Rust. So I guess the motivation here is like, why would you write a user interface program? Why would you target the web? Like to me, like it's a no-brainer. I think the web is like a really great technology, like as opposed to, I guess, well, we'll get into some alternatives later, but like if you target the web, you're multi-platform, you work on a phone, you work on different operating systems by default. All of this accessibility tooling that people who are blind, or anything, struggle to use touchscreen, can now use your website basically for free. You get so much for free, and like the best looking app you've ever used, or best looking website you've ever used would have been made with CSS, right? Like there's no magic. So like it gives you the ability to make super stylish stuff. And you can kind of see, you can like peel behind the curtain and you can see the source. Like this is the great thing about the web, is it's like they can't stop you like looking behind the curtain and seeing how their website's made. Versus like another alternative that we were talking about a couple of sessions ago was like immediate mode GUIs, like if you've heard of ImGUI, or here's one called eGUI. Like these, I think they're cool. Like I've implemented one myself. I think that they're a nice model for easy to kind of think about how they work behind your scenes, so you can kind of load the mental model into your head. But like I don't really like this at the moment. It's quite hard. I don't think it's very accessible, especially in the web. Like hard to get a screen reader to read this, hard to copy and paste it. It doesn't really behave the same way you'd expect a website to. And like a lot of these libraries haven't got a lot of traction, so that you lack that big movement behind you. And I know this is like the last thing that Rust users want to hear, because they love to use niche projects, but I guess you're already taking one bet by using Rust. So using a weird UI library is like another one. Cool. And yeah, and most people agree, right? This is something that really shocked me, but like, even here's the Mac OS system preferences. If you use a Mac, like even this is made like with web, like you can actually, it's made here out of HTML, and it actually uses like, I think Preact or React behind the scenes. To me, this like blew my mind, because this is the most native looking app imaginable, like, the system preferences, but like, it's really hard to find a software company making, UI and for example Spotify or Slack, and that's all made up. Hard to find one that's not like using the web in some way. Cool. So here's a little, I don't know if this is really interactive, but maybe slightly play along at home, at least in your mind. Or if you want to shout out, that's cool. So like you can kind of categorize websites, or maybe you can't. This is kind of the thing, is like into like websites and web apps. So for example, like Wikipedia, I always say this is like a website, like it's kind of everything's already there. It's the same for everyone. It's like kind of quite static, if that really means anything. And then maybe an example of a web app could be like Twitter. You have to log in. It's not very linkable. It's like kind of, it's got a lot of custom functionality inside of it. So we can kind of look at other examples here, like Netflix. This is kind of a web app. I mean, you can send a link to something in a lot of these things like Twitter and Netflix. So it kind of is a website, but Amazon, a lot of these things blur the lines, right? Figma, definitely a web app. Here's crates.io. This is definitely a website to me, but like it has like, a lot of JavaScript there, right? Like the search bar, this populates as you type. You can like click these things to copy them, right? Like there's little bits of interactivity added on, but like mostly quite static. So there's a big like spectrum of websites, is what I'm trying to say. And like a lot of people use these terms, websites, web apps, that are really hard to actually define. Yeah, so I kind of see it like this, like, you have static websites here, and then you have like kind of divergence. You get like very server focused apps where like, obviously you can run whatever language you like on your server, and it just generates HTML, sends it to the user, and maybe there's a bit of JavaScript sprinkled on, like how probably crates.io works. And then you have like things like Figma, where like really like powered on the client side with like JavaScript and WASM. So you can also use Rust here. And the state of Rust front ends is like, there's so much going on. There's like a massively overwhelming, and I'm gonna put a picture of someone looking overwhelmed on all the deliberately overwhelming slides from now on, just so you know that like you're not meant to know all this stuff, right? Like even while I was making this talk, I was finding new Rust web frameworks, and there is quite a good table. There's quite a good table here. If you go on GitHub, there's a link. And a lot of these frameworks, they don't have a lot of GitHub stars or a lot of activity, but like they kind of rise and fall really quickly. It's almost like what the JavaScript scene used to be like when React and Svelte and Angular and all this stuff was changing a lot more rapidly, and it still is, but I think Rust even more. It's a really good thing, but it can be super overwhelming and you don't know where to start, right? So yeah, so I don't know if you can see, but there's a guy overwhelmed in the corner as well. Yeah, so to me, like taking a step back from all of that, what's like the truth of the web, right? Like the truth is that you go on a website, your browser makes a HTTP request to the website, and they send back HTML, and like there's no website that doesn't do that. And if it didn't send back HTML, it wouldn't be able to do anything. So at the core, it's just text is like the kind of like the big revelation. So as an example, maybe this is a little low level. So if I lose you, if I lose you here, don't worry about it. But like, if I ping my website here, not to plug, like just as an example of something that's like quite simple, but any website is like this. You can make an HTTP request, and you get back just a list of HTML, just a string, and even like just looking at it from a looking behind HTTP, the standard, like it's just a list of headers and then a body. Maybe that's a little bit confusing, but like what I'm trying to say is that there's always simplicity at the core and just layers on top of that, and you can always like peel back the layers and make it simple for yourself. So you can kind of imagine it like your HTML can embed a script, and then your script can embed some WASM, and then your WASM streams in. WASM does a really cool thing now where you can compile. So WebAssembly, even though it is compiled, you have to compile it again before you can run it on your computer. So it kind of compiles as it streams in. And like if you do a lot of performance stuff on the web, you realize that like streaming and the web they go hand in hand. Like if you let's say you load a really, really long Wikipedia page, or something like that. So maybe something less boring, something more fun. Like with lots and lots of tags and lots of text, like it will start showing that page before the whole thing's downloaded. So like in this way, it streams in even the images and the pictures, and you must have seen an image load in like bit by bit, or maybe your website loads in and it's got no styles first, and then the styles come in later. So what I'm trying to say is like two things on this slide, right? Like the web is always very nested, and there's always levels of indirection, but you can kind of stream them in a way that means like effectively here, you don't get a lot of penalty for using WebAssembly in terms of performance, maybe more in terms of complexity, but we'll get to that in a bit. Here's an example. Laptops is technology I use at work, only for internal projects at the moment because it's a bit, what do I say, very fresh. But we have some ambitious engineers who want to use it. So, but here's a hello world, right? Like it's just an H1 tag on the screen with hello world in it, and it's got 3 files here. This is Chrome DevTools. If you like want to get into web development, learning Chrome DevTools is a really like a massive tip. Can help you understand a lot of stuff. And I've kind of loaded it here with like slow 3G, although you can't see it load in obviously. And you load in. This is the HTML document, and then you load in the script, JavaScript, and then you load in some WASM. And the document is really small, and this would probably, if you just loaded the document, it would be blank. Same if you just loaded the script, that's another 13 KB, and then another 110 KB for the WASM. And there are lots of ways to get the size down. This is a release build, but you can kind of do lots of really interesting stuff with the WebAssembly to make it smaller and smaller. But like, there's no way that this website could ever be faster using WebAssembly than it could be if you just wrote it as HTML, right? Like that's the speed of light, right? Like you can't get any faster than that. That's like the absolute limit. So like if you can get away with just writing HTML, or like having your server just generate HTML, that's going to be like the fastest imaginable website, right? Like in basically all cases. It's only when you need that interactivity and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, so here's the JavaScript. So like even when you're using WASM, you're still using JavaScript. Like there's no way to go straight to WASM at the moment. You have to like run it from JavaScript. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. Like it's, but you're still like, even if you think you're being a Rust engineer and you're like just using, you never touch JavaScript, like it's still there. And then here's of course the WASM, like, what is this, like a million lines, a million lines of WASM that is like impossible to debug as well. So there are pros and cons. So I kind of would say like, treat the web with a kind of respect where you're like using the platform and you're only adding these levels of complexity when you need it. So like if you're building a static website or something that's a little bit more like a website than a web app, you're probably going to find it a lot like more natural, and you're going to find yourself enjoying it a lot more if you kind of stay away from things that are too complex and only add these layers like adding JavaScript and then adding WASM when you need them. If that makes sense. Cool. I don't know if there are any questions up to this point, but feel free to interject. Oh, hold on, there's some in the chat maybe. Oh, okay.
No questions in the chat yet, Angus.
Okay, cool.
But this is great, thank you.
Nice. Okay, cool. Here's another thing that I thought was really interesting, maybe a bit provocative, and I'm not sure that I really fully agree with this statement, but like a lot of companies, they reach for things like React and high JavaScript frameworks because they struggle to scale their websites, and kind of this is like because the web is like the web is like still very much like this very academic thing that just like grew way out of control, and like making websites is its most fun when they're like little experiments, little art projects, small websites like blogs and stuff. So why would you give yourself all of the headache that these companies end up having? They have it because they're companies, but you don't need to have it, right? A lot of things like strong typing and things that Rust gives you, they kind of don't really apply quite so well in the web. They're really, and don't get me wrong, because I love strong types and things like this and functional programming, but it's harder to type for the web because every browser is different. So like you're not in a very controlled environment, like especially with things like TypeScript and JavaScript. You could be targeting a user who's using a browser that's so old it doesn't have WebAssembly even, or doesn't have like certain JavaScript language features, and it's very hard to like have your type system tell you that. Like otherwise you'd be going absolutely crazy. Cool. Okay, that's the first half done. I don't know how I'm doing for time. So here's the blogging part, right? So I'm always really disappointed, no offense to people who do this, but when people have Medium blogs and like what's the other one that's even worse? Anyway, yeah, people use Medium for blogs all the time, or other pre-built blogging solutions. And like, if you're a computer scientist, I think it's so cool to just make your own because it's not that hard. And like, it's very easy to do better job than Medium. Their SEO is fine, but their performance is always pretty bad. There's loads of junk on the screen. I haven't helped it because I put up dev tools, but there's like ads for other blogs, signing in, all this junk. You don't really want it, right? Although listening is cool. I would struggle to, that would take maybe a bit of product on your own, but so what would I want a blog to look like? What does it fundamentally look like, right? It's usually got one landing page that's like, juliaevans.ca, whatever, with a list of all of the blog posts, and then you've got the blog pages, which are like / and then whatever the title is. But what's like a really great blog has all this stuff, right? Like, we're not going to compromise. We want a light and dark mode. We want syntax highlighting for all our code snippets, which probably, if you're an engineer, your blog will be full of. You want to be able to write blog posts in Markdown, like no one's going to write a blog in HTML unless you really love it, like me. But you'd want to write a blog post in Markdown. You want to have really good SEO, right? And this is a lot easier than a lot of SEO gurus would have you believe. And maybe even some cool image stuff, because like if you have like lots and lots of images on your blog, it can be quite expensive, especially if, like, for example, every article on your landing page had its own image associated with it. You kind of want to do something like blurry placeholders, which we'll get into later. And we're going to use like small, understandable libraries. Like my rule is like, I don't use the library if I can't imagine a world where like I had to write it myself, right? So lepdos is out the window because like I'm not that smart. But like, something like a JSON serializer, maybe slightly more possible. So one model for making websites that I really like is this kind of like, I call it the GitHub Pages model. I don't think it has a real name. It's kind of come from this website builder called Jekyll, where like you have, it's like file based. So you have an index.html. This is like kind of imagine your build artifact of your website. So you have, this is like on the slash root on like the home page. And then for every root subroot there, you have like another folder. And inside that folder, this is like what you get if you go to like your website / blog post A. You'd serve this website here. And then you can just put like all other kinds of images and whatever favicon, whatever you want in this folder as well. So it's very simple, like file-based structure that you can use, and this is really useful because if you want to get your website online really quick, a really great way to do that is GitHub Pages. I know you kind of have to sell your soul to Microsoft, but you get a free domain, and you get you can use this GitHub action, and it's free also if your project's open source. That will like deploy. Make sure you use the official one, and it will deploy to GitHub Pages every time you push to a branch, which is really cool. I use that. You can check out my blog on my GitHub as well. Cool. So what do our blog files look like? Something, if you've never written a blog, something that's really popular is this idea of front matter. So you have like 3 dashes at the beginning of a massive like Markdown file, like a .md file. So this is all Markdown here. And you have 3 dashes. You have some YAML here, so just key value pairs. So you write the information about your blog, obviously here, like the date and stuff, the kind of like metadata, and then like 3 dashes ends it, and then you have your post. So it's kind of just a way to like group these two things together. So think about our Rust. We're going to build like a Rust static website builder. Okay, so we want to turn our YAML files with Markdown into like a Rust data type here. I've called it card, maybe because I could have all the blog posts as cards on a landing page or something like this. So you kind of just turn this into a struct, right? Like you just map across, and you can just use like Serda YAML or any YAML parser for this. And kind of just like literally just read this file in as a string and split it when you see like three dashes. And all this stuff will like fail at build time, right? So when you build a static site, you have like a build time, when you run the program. And this is what would happen in your CI. And so your CI would fail if you made a mistake with like your front matter or something like this. So it's like a good way to kind of enforce like strongly typed or like strongly built websites that never get into production if there's a problem, with the types or anything like this, or a problem at runtime. Like you can even check, like you can even ping in your Rust code like all your images, or even just call like file.open on all of your images, just to make sure that you actually type the path out and it actually does exist. And yeah, other things like you can have a hidden flag, tags, whatever. Cool. And then once we have this, right? And also, sorry, I forgot to mention that I've passed in the content here. I've kind of like converted it into HTML when I've passed it in. And there's really great libraries to do that again in a bit. And then once you've got like a list of blogs, you can like turn them into this like like I was saying before, this GitHub pages format. So you just kind of save the content as a file, with the name being like whatever the name of the title of your blog is, like maybe with dashes between it. And these are like, this is your website right here, right? You give this is now like completely language agnostic. You can put this on any server and it will serve it. Cool. And you won't have to write like, mywebsite.com/index.html. Like if you're serving it with Jekyll or the GitHub pages server, it will just like automatically serve you that file. Cool. So yeah, here's a deliberately overwhelming slide once again with a deliberately overwhelmed face. Like templating is a really cool tool, probably one of the most underhyped tools in the whole of the web right now. Like basically everything like is very influenced by templating. Everything from like Dioxys and Leptos, these new Rust frameworks, and to like React, but then like it's really also really old. Like here's a templating library. Here's the oldest one I could find from 2008 called C template, which is like now called Google template, that they used at Google to make Google in 2008, and really really simple, very similar to the libraries you find nowadays. And like if you go on this is a website called Are We Web Yet, that you might have heard of, that just shows a list of like all of the possible all of these different templating libraries, right? And there's like a different style of templates for everyone, but most of them are the same. Some of them, the main difference they do is like how much of it is like typed versus untyped. So obviously if you really love types, like you go for something like this, like Axama. But yeah, I'll leave that as an exercise. So templating is like this, you make a .html file, but then you can leave variables in. So then when you build your website, you can have like a template for like, this is what a blog looks like. And you can just put the title in, and then, maybe like a load of fluff at the beginning, some styles, etc. And you just kind of like, this is like a completely made up syntax for templating that I'm using here. Probably is one of those. But you just kind of, usually it's like some kind of curly bracket and then a variable name. They also have these like pipes. This is kind of like calling a function. So I'm kind of like piping the body that I've passed in here into a markdown function, and you set these up in Rust. And you can use like, there's a really great library called pull down CMark, which is like super fast, like turns HTML, turns a markdown into HTML like super fast. If you don't know much about Markdown, it's actually quite an interesting bit of tech. Like there's no formal specification for Markdown. The guy who invented Markdown really didn't want it to have a formal specification. The closest thing we have is something called GitHub flavored Markdown, which is like a really long document explaining how like the GitHub style of Markdown, which is kind of quite specific. It has like special kinds of tables and strike through and like check boxes. So you can find lots of different like flavors of Markdown online, but pull down CMark is like super fast and really simple. Cool. And if you want to test out like these files that look like this, website looks like this, you can use any web server. The one that I always use is like this one that's built into Python, weirdly enough. But you can use like, if you're like a real hacker, you can use Netcat or NC, which is like a Unix tool. You can Google like serving as like file server with Netcat, which is like a cool little exercise. But if you just type in Python 3-m, which is like using a module http.server, that in any directory, it will like serve it using the exact same rules, where like index.html sends the, is sent if you don't give a path. So this is like, most people have that installed probably. Cool. Okay. Next one, another deliberately overwhelming slide, SEO. SEO is actually super easy. Like if you could like memorize this entire slide, which you obviously couldn't, you'd be able to be like a SEO guru. Basically, you know, the search engines, they really want to index your website. And if you build it statically, they're going to have a really, really easy time doing that. So there's certain like meta tags. You just have to put a big wall of them at the beginning of your template for your pages. And you can just insert all the stuff in with kind of like these template variables from the whatever templating library you're using, like I was saying before. So there's two different, for some reason, everything's duplicate because there's like a Facebook version, which is OG, and Twitter version, which is for Twitter. If you want to have like that little card, you know, that cute little card when you link your website in WhatsApp or anything, or Slack, where it says a little picture and a description, makes it look really nice. And it gives you better SEO scores, and like there's loads of things you can do, like web app capable, yes, that like boost your SEO. I took a lot of these from, there's a project called Elm Pages, which is like a static site generator where the guy really thought about it, SEO. So yeah. Syntax highlighting is another cool one. This is really, really easy to do. If you've used Markdown, your Markdown, if you do like a backtick, a triple backtick, and then write the name of the language, or just do a triple backtick and write some code, it will turn that into like a code block in the HTML. And then there's tiny little JavaScripts you can just link, and they're just hosted on the internet. And you know that's how 99% of people do their syntax highlighting. Like you can actually get your server to like render this as like a million different like divs, like tiny little CSS things that work without JavaScript. And it's a cool project, but for most people, this is like a good example of progressive enhancement. You know, you make your website, the code blocks are black and white, and they're just in a monospace font. And then when the script loads in, there's like going to be some tiny, like, you know, few kilobyte script that most people probably already have cached because they will have been on another website that uses it. It loads in a JavaScript file that like parses and detects all the languages, and then there's a CSS file that like styles them in whatever. And you can, instead of typing default here, you can type in one of the themes. This is from a tool called Highlight.js. And even cooler, even cooler. Oh, by the way, if a URL starts with 2 slashes, this is something I learned while I was making the slides. That's like, it uses the same protocol as whatever you're currently on. So if you're on HTTP, this will send an HTTP request, or this is just a little thing. Yeah, to make it even cooler, you can actually have like a day mode, night mode of your syntax highlighting completely for free with 0.js. So what you can do is you can load 2 different style sheets. Here I've got Tokyo Night Dark, which is like a cool night theme. And I've got GitHub, which is like the GitHub style light theme that I think is quite good. And you can just do a media here, media equals, and then a media query, which is like a kind of a very, very small CSS language of like Booleans that says like, so prefers color scheme dark is when you set your system. So on your phone, you might set dark mode, or on your computer, you might set dark mode. And even when your phone or your computer transitions from day into night mode, like even while you're on the page without refreshing, this is going to like nicely transition between the two, like in the browser engine. You know, browsers are like massive projects. All of the smartest people from all the smartest places go and work on browsers. So you can really just piggyback off all their hard work. So like if you go on my website, for example, like, and you just change your mode, all I have is this exact 2 links. And it like smoothly transitions between the two. And, you know, compare that to like, there are lots of websites like Google, for example, where you have to refresh your page, or it's kind of glitchy, the day mode, night mode thing. So this is like completely for free, Node.js, and this is the best possible solution in my opinion. And even the, sorry, I'm gushing about this, even the links won't load until like, if you open the page in your entire session, you're never in dark mode, like this link will never load because like it will, the browser's smart enough to never even like make the request for this. So you save the user like, you know, so many bytes of their data plan. Cool. Okay, and here's the last thing. My little Wales reference. So a really cool and like really advanced thing that a lot of websites do, like Medium, is that they'll automatically blur in a thumbnail for your images. So while you're like, if you're on a slow data connection or you've just gone into the train or whatever, it will show you this, just so there's something on the page and everything's not shifting around, and like you can kind of tell what's gonna happen. And there's a really cool algorithm out for this called thumbhash. It hasn't got a lot of GitHub stars, but it's by this guy Evan Wallace, who works at Figma, who's a big Rust evangelist as well. And this is written in Rust as well. And it turns like a big image. So you take an image, you compress it down to 100 by 100, and then you feed it into thumbhash, and it gives you like a base 64 string. That's like, what is this, like 20 letters. And this is enough to like reconstruct this image just to a really blurry state. So this is like super performance efficient. A really cool project in my opinion. And there's kind of like good pages where you can see different variants. Like there's another one called Blur Hash that I think maybe was there first. And they do like, they use it like quite for apps and stuff. So yeah, it makes that app, you can see the app on the right here is like way more inviting. And how do you do this? Yeah, so you can just kind of the same way you would do any other HTML, you can add a tag here, data thumbhash. This is like completely arbitrary. I could have written like data XYZ, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm going to write like, this is where I'm going to put that, that hash. And I'm going to make another function here and called thumbhash that's going to take an image URL, just the same one that you would have put for the source. Is going to attach them. So your built website is going to look like this. Every image is going to have a thumbhash built into the HTML, and then this is the Rust code for that that function thumbhash. So Rust has really good image support. If you've never used it, you can just there's an image library. You just load the image in. Resize it down to 100 by 100, like I was saying, and then you call this RGB to thumbhash, which is like in this thumbhash library, and then you just base 64 encode that. And then when you get over to the client side, this is where you have to add a tiny little script. So you do have to write a tiny bit of JavaScript to get this to work, or WASM if you insist. But I think the JavaScript is like so small, it would to use WASM would be like not worth it. Where you can use you can actually just import a JavaScript library from a URL. You don't have to bundle or anything like that. Like this is just code that you could just paste straight into an HTML file. It goes through, it finds all the images that have a thumbhash. So this is just like a selector that says here, every image that has a thumbhash. Turn that thumbhash into a data URL and like show it as the image. And because I've selected here like loading equals lazy, the images, this is like a new browser feature that not all browsers support, like maybe older ones don't. But as you scroll, like the images will pop in. So, you don't automatically load, like, make the user load all these images when they start. When they land on the page, they kind of load in as they come into the viewport. So you don't really do this for the images that are like further down the page, maybe not for the one that's at the very top. Cool. And yeah, and that's exactly how you get like these. That's all you really need to do. And there's even simpler versions of this where you don't need any JavaScript because you just make like a very small, they call it like a zero quality web P. So it's like a very, very small web P. So you wouldn't even need any JavaScript because it's just a valid image. Nice. That's all I have. So yeah, that's the end.
Thank you very much, Angus. That was great. Do we have any questions for Angus? Okay, we've got one here from Tim. Smartphones were specifically designed to be web devices. Here we are with native apps for most things. What went wrong?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah, I completely agree. Like progressive web apps and have really been stifled. I don't want to call out Apple, but I'm sure most people will know that like Apple having control of the App Store is like a really big thing for them. They like to have the revenue percentage of everything that comes to that and the quality control that comes with that. but really like, yeah, exactly. For most companies, a website is all you need. And a lot of consultancies are like recommending now that like it's so much easier to make a website than a web app. I find this as well. By the way, I have an app out if anyone's interested. Just out on the App Store just last week for National Haiku Day. My app 575, which is like a haiku version of Be Real, but you write a haiku instead of posting a commit picture.
Great talk, by the way, but you're wrong about Apple. They originally used HTML, and so the plan was to use HTML, CSS for all the apps, but developers rebelled and complained a lot. They wanted to write their own code. So then Apple opened up the Objective-C libraries and Cocoa and stuff, so we could program natively.
Right. Yeah. So 100%. Yeah. I definitely. I meant more like whether the apps come through the App Store or whether they just go on a URL. But yeah. But the technology, I didn't know that.
Cocoa is a lot easier to use than HTML and CSS. Definitely, I feel.
Really? Oh, okay. I would disagree.
If you're a C programmer already, it's like HTML, CSS is just so. I find it very, very tricky to use. Like I can't get anything done in HTML, CSS.
Yeah,
easily.
I know what you mean. One thing I do like about HTML is that like it's quite forgiving. Like if you say you're writing this image and you didn't leave off this closing tag, or somehow there was like some error, you didn't close that quote or something, like the browser will actually still try and render that. So I think this is like, especially this is very where it's very different kind of model to like, for example, Rust. Like it kind of has this built-in, very beginner friendly or mistake forgiving style.
Years ago, I worked for a company. We wrote a news scraper program, and I hated HTML because it was so forgiving.
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't write a parser that was accurate. I had to deal with all these edge cases. We kept discovering new websites that use HTML slightly different, dropped off tags and stuff like that. And
yeah. I hear it's a real struggle.
It's great for users though.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Angus? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Angus. That was excellent. We'll give Angus a virtual round of applause, I suppose.
Thanks, guys.
A real one.
A real one
as well. Excellent talk. I learned a lot from that.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to share like your website, your app, your blog.
Oh yeah, I will share my website. Here's my website. It's angusjf.com. And my app is called 575. You can find it at bento.me/575. I should have really bought 575.com, but it was super expensive. Yeah.
I discovered that if you want to put code, syntax highlighted code in a website, you can actually convert code to SVG with syntax highlighted and drop an SVG in. And you can still cut and paste text.
That's really cool. Yeah. I think definitely like doing things that keep like cut and paste like super important. Don't break people's workflows and like don't break screen readers. So often I see people like I was working on a project once for an airline, and they wanted to put like all of the text, all of the big banners like in SVGs that like a screen reader couldn't read. He couldn't copy and paste, and like loaded in so slowly. Like I think web is often assumed to be like a platform for maybe more people who are more like visual, but actually it's also there are lots of web jobs that are for people who are really like performance focused. And I think that like this is something that really we could do with a lot of like people moving from like I don't know, embedded programming or something, which is like my background, into like web, where they can like make all the websites really fast. Would be really great.
Oh, you're an embedded programmer?
Yeah, well, that's
I feel another talk coming on, Chiara.
I will not talk about those days are gone.
Oh, please, because I do a lot of digital electronics, mostly FPGAs and stuff.
Yeah. So, oh, nice.
So
Yeah,
embedded program would be really great for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've never done embedded programming using Rust, but I think it would be really great. Yeah.
I hear it's really good now.
Yeah.
If you choose the right microprocessor, like
Yeah.
ESP32 and stuff like that.
Yeah, Rust for everything is what everyone's saying.
Before everybody leaves, is there any news or anything upcoming, Kira, that people should be aware of?
Yeah, so 17th of May is the next book club meetup, and then I'm drawing a blank on the other dates, but I will send them in the Discord for anyone who's missing it.